Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Pho, founder and editor of KevinMD. Today on the show, we have Kara Pepper. She's an internal medicine physician, and she wrote the KevinMD article, Call a Consult, Depression versus Burnout. Kara, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional ballet dancer. So left home in eighth grade and moved to communist Russia and trained. And ultimately, after years of dancing, kept breaking things and had to do a fallback plan of going to med school. So went through this journey of med school, feeling like I tricked people into letting me in, and spent many years thinking that I was an imposter in the sea of super smart people. So worked hard and dealt with my perfectionism and finally found my way to internal medicine. So, years into my career, I ended up really burned out and almost left medicine because of all that fatigue and burnout and feeling like what I was doing was overwhelming. So thought I was going to move home to Florida and open a yoga studio, but thank God took a sabbatical and addressed my own burnout and asked for help in a meaningful way for the first time in my life.
Wonderful, and we'll certainly get into that journey in a little bit, but tell me a little bit about your practice.
Yeah, I'm outpatient internal medicine, so primary care, see everything 18 and older, have a special focus in eating disorder care for my patients.
And you mentioned you had a background in ballet training. Has that helped or hurt you as a physician now?
Dancers and doctors are the same people, perfectionists, lifelong learners, want to get better and better at your job every day. So now I pay it forward. I'm the primary care physician for Atlanta Ballet. So it's been a really cool full circle.
All right, so let's go into your KevinMD article, Call a Consult, Depression versus Burnout. Now, for those who haven't read your article, can you walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise that a lot of people are struggling with burnout, in this season of medicine, but particularly post-COVID. So from my own personal experience, having dealt with both depression and burnout, a lot of people come to me as a physician coach saying, I just don't feel good. What is this? And frankly, it's easier to say that we're burnout than depressed. So really distinguishing between the two is not only important for treatment, but also important just to realize where you are and what you need. So the article comes from that place of, really personal story and really wanting to help physicians find their best life.
Excellent. Can you share a little bit about your own personal journey and what are some of the things that you did to overcome that?
Yeah, well, we're not really trained to ask for help in healthcare. We're supposed to have all the answers and be really independent and be able to help other people. So asking for help was not something I was certainly trained to do. So when I became so burned out that I really could not show up at work anymore, I was forced to ask for help. And I had tentatively done that for years leading up to that, but not in a meaningful way. So really had to take the advice from my therapist and found coaching at that point in time, was able to actually set goals and address my own brain and the narrative I had around practicing medicine and make it a really healthy one for the first time ever.
What about physician practices today? What are some of the specific aspects that lead physicians to burnout or even exacerbate depression and mental illness?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the data, the overwhelming thing that people talk about is EMR, paperwork, dealing with bureaucracies and insurance companies, healthcare companies. But I think part of it is that we go in with this altruistic, wanting to help people feeling, and there's a lot that takes us away from the bedside, and that dissociation really, really takes an impact. And then we've got issues like second victim syndrome, particularly in this era of COVID, where people are witnessing trauma and not having a place to process that. All of this compounds into not having the time or space or cultural awareness to want to ask for help and take it.
So some people say that when physicians ask for help, that places burden of the burnout on the physician himself or herself. Now, a lot of people also say that we need a more structural change around a physician. We need some physicians need help to help alleviate the burdens of the EMR and need some help in alleviating the stresses of practice. Now, how do you comment on that? And how can we change some of the more structural influences that cause physicians to burn out?
Absolutely. It's not if people are going to struggle, it's when. We know that 80% of physicians struggle with second victim syndrome, emotional trauma from unanticipated events. We know that half of physicians are burned out at any given time, and the numbers are increasing after COVID. So waiting for the physician to say, hey, here's the white flag, I need to ask for help. Institutions need to assume that this is going to be an issue in the culture of their organization, and there are structured evidence-based guidelines in place that you can implement to say, hey, we have this resource to catch you when you fall.
So you refer to second victim syndrome. I'm actually not familiar with that. Can you explain to my audience what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was described about 20 years ago, but it's the emotional trauma from unanticipated patient events. So we all have that story of the first time this patient died unexpectedly and it really impacted you. I mean, for most of us, years later, you can still remember the granular details of the light that was out in the corner of the room, that type of thing. But this emotional impact that we carry and peer-to-peer support and institutional planning for this is really at the core of it. So helping each other through these crises in a way that we uniquely understand, that really helps us heal from this trauma.
Now, burnout, as you mentioned, has reached almost 50% of physicians, and this was even before the pandemic. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what are some unique ways that COVID-19 has exacerbated burnout among physicians?
Right. So, I mean, not only is the acuity that what we're seeing in the hospital and the ICU setting so much higher, patients are sicker and dying. On the back end, there's the guilt of, am I going to get my family sick? Am I going to be able to send my kids to school? How am I going to balance all these needs? And in addition, physicians taking pay cuts because they're not taking the volume of patients that they were seeing before in order to safely accommodate patients. So I think the problems that we were addressing before COVID now have just compounded and amplified through COVID. And because we are socially distanced, that isolation and the loneliness is making that even worse. So there's a lot of factors.
So we're talking to Kara Pepper. She's an internal medicine physician, and she wrote the KevinMD article, Call a Consult, Depression versus Burnout. Now, let's say if you're a practicing physician currently, what are some of the signs and symptoms he or she should look out for that may want to prompt them to get more help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of them, I joke, both of them feel like crap. They both are in this place of either overwhelm or darkness or, just unhappiness that's there. But the distinction is really important. Depression obviously is a mental illness that gets treated with medicine and psychotherapy. And burnout by comparison is an occupational hazard. So it's structural support within your organization and addressing your narrative there. So I wouldn't prescribe a scribe to treat your depression, and I wouldn't treat, your overwhelm and your burnout with an SSRI. So the treatment is very different, and it's important to make the distinction for that reason.
And what kind of resources are available to the majority of physicians today in case they want to seek more help?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's the standard traditional model of, asking for help from your personal physician, whether it's your PCP or your psychiatrist, and psychotherapy. There's a whole army of physician coaches who are trained in this evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapy model where we're able to actually address physician needs. There's really interesting trials that are going on showing that it improves burnout, improves engagement, reduces or improves resilience. So coaching is another way forward, which is how I integrate into this whole system. It's really neat.
Now, I talked to a lot of physician coaches on this podcast. Now, I always ask them, so at what point does a doctor know when he or she should seek out a coach?
Absolutely. So I think anyone who wants to feel better and improve their experience of life, either professionally or personally, like that's a reason to seek out coaching. This is not a new concept in corporate America. Executives have coaches all the time. So you don't have to be in crisis in order to ask for coaching. But within the realm of coaching, there are coaches who specialize in all kinds of things, whether it's burnout or leadership or relationships. So sometimes people seek it out for very specific reasons. So for me, I feel the best I've felt in my life, and I have a therapist and I have a coach, because for me, it's just part of my wellness package. It's what keeps me sane and keeps me curious about what's going on in my own life experience.
And if a physician wants to seek out a coach, what are some red flags to look out for? And what are some specific things that they should look for in order to find a coach that's a good fit for them?
Absolutely. So part of it is exactly as you say, just fit. Is it someone you connect with? Is it someone you feel like you'd be vulnerable with? Is it someone that you like their methodology? So asking, tell me what it's like to be your client. What is it like to work with you? What are the modalities that you use? And seeing if that really is a fit. So many of us are doing work in the COVID environment to really reach out to our colleagues. And so there's plenty of free, accessible ways that you can interface with coaches and test the waters if you've never done it before.
And my final question, Kara, what is your take-home message that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience?
Yeah, you are your most important patient. You are allowed to make decisions. You're allowed to give yourself permission to try new things, to go off the beaten path and to create a life that you really love, whether that's in medicine or otherwise. So this is your one precious life, and giving yourself permission to do it in the best way for you is absolutely within your power.
And how can people find you?
You can find me on social media at Kara Pepper MD or on my website, karapeppermd.com.
Kara, thank you so much for sharing your insight, and thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.